Roy Callahan wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the broken hyperdrive unit on his workbench. Another impossible job that other mechanics had refused. That was fine. Impossible was his specialty. His small repair shop sat in the industrial sector of Helix 7, a massive orbital trading station where thousands of species came to buy, sell, and trade. Down here in the lower levels, away from the clean corridors and fancy restaurants, this was where the real work happened. Ships got fixed, cargo got moved, and people like Roy made enough credits to survive. He had just finished sealing the hyperdrive casing when his workshop door slid open. A draconid entered, ducking his massive head to fit through the doorway. Roy had seen draconids before, but never one that looked this worried. The creature stood nearly 12 feet tall with deep blue scales that shimmered under the workshop lights. His wings were folded tight against his back, a sign of distress in their culture. Roy had learned to read alien body language after 15 years of working on this station. "You are the mechanic who fixes impossible things?" the draconid asked in heavily accented Standard Galactic. Roy nodded. "Depends on what you need fixed." The draconid looked around the workshop nervously. "My name is Torin. I need you to do something that no one else will do. Something that shames me to even ask." Roy put down his tools and gave the alien his full attention. "I don't judge. Tell me what you need." Torin pulled out a credit chip and placed it on the workbench. Roy glanced at the amount displayed and his eyes widened. It was enough money to buy a small ship. "I need you to help me end a life," Torin said quietly. "Painlessly, quickly, with dignity." Roy felt his stomach tighten. "I'm a mechanic, not a killer. You need to leave." "Please, let me explain," Torin said desperately. 6 months ago, our cargo ship was attacked by pirates. We fought them off, but one of our crew was badly hurt. His name is Ash. He is young, barely into his adult years. The injuries destroyed his flight organs. His wings are paralyzed. His spine is broken in 3 places. Roy listened, but kept his hand near the emergency alert button under his desk. Torin continued. "In our culture, a draconid who cannot fly is already dead. We brought him to the best doctors on 5 different worlds. All of them said the same thing. The damage is too severe. He will never fly again. He will never heal. So why bring him here?" Roy asked. "Because I cannot do what our culture demands," Torin said, and Roy saw tears forming in the dragon's large eyes. "They told me to end his suffering, to give him an honorable death. But when I look at him, I see my youngest brother. I see someone who wants to live even if he cannot fly. So I ran. I brought him here far from our homeworld, hoping maybe someone could help. But no one will. The doctors say his biology is too damaged. And now I'm out of time and out of options." Roy sat back in his chair. "You want me to kill him because you can't?" "I want you to help him die without pain," Torin corrected. "Because I have failed him in every other way." Roy stood up and walked to his workshop window. Outside, he could see the endless traffic of ships coming and going. Thousands of lives, all moving forward, all with purpose. He thought about his sister, about how the doctors had said she was beyond help, about how she had died not from her injuries but from everyone giving up on her. "Show me," Roy said finally. Torin looked surprised. "Show you what?" "Show me this, Ash. Let me see what we're dealing with." They walked through the station's lower corridors until they reached the cargo docks. Torin led him to a small ship and opened the cargo bay door. Inside, the bay was dark except for a few dim emergency lights. Roy stepped inside and his breath caught. A draconid lay on the metal floor, but unlike Torin's deep blue scales, this one was pure white. An albino. His scales were so pale they almost glowed in the darkness. His wings were spread out flat, completely still. Medical equipment surrounded him, keeping him alive, but nothing more. But what struck Roy most were the eyes. They were open, watching him. Deep red eyes that held intelligence and awareness. This was not some mindless creature waiting to die. This was a person who was trapped in a body that no longer worked. Roy knelt down beside Ash and pulled out his portable scanner. He ran it over the dragon's body, studying the readings carefully. The damage was catastrophic. The flight organs were completely burned out. The wings had no nerve response. The spine showed multiple fractures that had healed incorrectly, but something else caught his attention. The neural pathways were intact. Damaged, yes, but not destroyed. The brain was still sending signals to the body. They just had nowhere to go. Roy looked into Ash's eyes and saw something he recognized. Hope. Tiny, fragile, almost dead, but still there. "How long has he been conscious?" Roy asked. "The entire time. Torin said sadly. He cannot speak. He cannot move. But he is aware of everything. The doctor said it would be kinder to end his consciousness, but I could not do that either. I'm a coward in all ways. Roy stood up and faced Torin. I won't kill him. Torin's shoulders slumped in defeat. Then I will find someone who will. You didn't let me finish, Roy said. I won't kill him because I think I can fix him. Torin stared at Roy as if he had spoken in an alien language. Fix him? Did you not see the scans? Every doctor, every specialist, they all said. They were looking at it wrong, Roy interrupted. They were trying to fix him biologically. But I'm not a doctor. I'm a mechanic. And when I look at him, I don't see damaged biology. I see a machine that needs new parts. You cannot be serious, Torin whispered. Roy walked back to Ash and placed his hand gently on the dragon's head. Ash's eyes focused on him with desperate intensity. I'm going to try something that has never been done before, Roy said, speaking directly to Ash now. It's going to be painful. It might not work. And even if it does work, you will never be the same as you were before. But if you want to live, if you want a chance to fly again, I will give you that chance. Ash's eyes filled with tears. His mouth opened slightly and a small sound came out. Not words, but something that sounded like yes. Roy looked at Torin. I'll need to move him to my workshop. I'll need that credit chip for parts and equipment. And I'll need you to not tell anyone what I'm doing. The Draconid community on this station will be furious, Torin warned. They will demand his return. They will call you a heretic. Then they can get in line behind everyone else who thinks I'm crazy, Roy said. He looked down at Ash one more time. Get me a cargo lifter. We have work to do. As they prepared to move Ash, Roy felt the familiar weight of an impossible job settling on his shoulders. But for the first time in years, he felt something else too. Purpose. His sister had died because no one was willing to try. This dragon would live because someone finally was. 3 days had passed since Roy sealed his workshop with Ash inside. The dragon took up most of the floor space, his white scales reflecting the bright work lights Roy had set up around him. Medical monitors beeped steadily, tracking vital signs that Roy was still learning to understand. Roy had not slept more than a few hours total. He survived on stimulant patches and instant meals while he worked to map Ash's entire nervous system. The complexity stunned him. Draconid biology was nothing like human anatomy. They had redundant neural clusters running through their bodies like backup computer systems. Their bones were not solid but crystalline structures that conducted bioelectrical signals like fiber optic cables. Most fascinating were the flight organs. 2 large chambers in the chest cavity that generated some kind of propulsion field. Roy had seen nothing like them in any species. The pirates had hit Ash with some kind of energy weapon that cooked the organs from the inside. They were completely dead, just charred tissue taking up space. Ash watched Roy work without complaint. The dragon could not speak, could barely move his head, but his red eyes followed every movement. Roy had started talking to him on the first day, explaining each step of the process. It felt natural somehow, like talking to a patient instead of a project. Your neural pathways are incredible, Roy said as he adjusted a scanner over Ash's spine. Humans have one main pathway from brain to body. You have 5 separate networks. That's why you're still conscious even with all this damage. Your brain found alternate routes. Ash made a small sound somewhere between a hum and a growl. Roy had learned to recognize it as acknowledgement. The problem is your flight organs, Roy continued. I cannot fix them biologically, but I think I can build replacements, cybernetic implants that connect directly to your neural network. You would control them the same way you controlled your original organs, through thought and instinct. The signals would just go to machines instead of tissue. Roy pulled up a holographic blueprint he had been designing. It showed 2 mechanical chambers that would fit where the burned organs currently sat. They looked nothing like the organic versions, all hard angles and glowing power cores, but the neural connection points matched perfectly. You would be part machine, Roy said quietly. Some of your people might see that as worse than death. I need you to understand what I am offering. This is not restoration. This is transformation. Ash's eyes locked on the hologram. His mouth opened and closed several times, trying to form words his damaged body could not produce. Finally, a single sound came out rough and desperate. Roy's translator picked it up. Yes. Roy nodded and saved the blueprint. Okay, then we do this. A loud pounding on the workshop door made them both freeze. Roy checked his security screen and saw a group of Draconids outside, along with several station security officers. Roy Callahan, this is station security. A voice called through the door speaker. "We have a petition from the Draconid community requesting immediate access to your workshop. They claim you are holding one of their people against his will." Roy activated the intercom. "Ash is here by choice. Tell them to leave." One of the Draconids outside pushed forward. He was enormous, even for his species, with scales so dark they were almost black. His voice boomed through the door. "I am Ancient Wing, High Priest of our order. You hold a sacred duty, human. That creature inside is not one of us anymore. He cannot fly. He cannot hunt. He cannot fulfill his purpose. What you are doing is cruelty disguised as mercy." "What I'm doing is giving him a choice," Roy shot back. "Something your culture seems afraid of." "We demand his return," Ancient Wing said. "Our laws are clear. He must be released to us for proper ceremony." "Station law says I don't have to do anything," Roy replied. "He's my patient and he wants to stay." The security officer looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Callahan, the station council is reviewing this matter. They will issue a ruling within 48 hours. Until then, I have to ask you to cooperate." "I'll cooperate with the council's decision when it comes," Roy said. "Until then, this door stays locked." The group outside argued for another few minutes before leaving. Roy watched them go and felt his heart pounding. He had made powerful enemies today. But when he looked at Ash, the dragon's eyes showed something Roy had not expected. Gratitude. Roy returned to his work, but his hands were shaking now. 48 hours was not enough time to complete the surgery. He needed at least a week, maybe more. But if the council ruled against him, security would break down his door and take Ash away. That night, as Roy tried to sleep on a cot in the corner of his workshop, his personal communicator buzzed. The message was anonymous and encrypted. "We want to help. Lower Docks, Bay 47, midnight." "Come alone," Roy stared at the message. It could be a trap. It could be the traditionalists trying to lure him out so they could break into his workshop. But it could also be legitimate help. He looked over at Ash, who was resting but not truly sleeping. The dragon's eyes were open, always watching, always aware. Roy made his decision. He set up automated monitoring systems around Ash and checked that all the medical equipment had backup power. Then he grabbed his tool bag and headed for the door. "I'll be back soon," he told Ash. "Don't go anywhere." It might have been his imagination, but Roy thought he saw the corner of Ash's mouth twitch in what could have been a smile. The lower docks were exactly as dangerous as their reputation suggested. This was where the station's law barely reached, where smugglers and black market dealers operated freely. Bay 47 was in a section that had been abandoned after a fire years ago. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows. Roy approached carefully, his hand on the small plasma cutter in his belt. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. 3 Draconids emerged from the darkness. They were younger than Ancient Wing, their scales bright with colors that seemed to shimmer and shift. The one in front was female, her scales a mix of silver and pale gold. "You came," she said. "We were not sure you would trust us." "I'm not sure I do," Roy admitted. "Who are you?" "My name is Silver," the female said. "These are my clutchmates, born from the same nesting. We heard what you were trying to do for Ash. We want to help." "Why?" Roy asked. "Your priest called what I'm doing an abomination." Silver's eyes darkened with pain. "Because I had a younger sister. She was born with weak wings. She could barely glide, could not fly properly. Our parents brought her to the priests for judgment. They said she had no future. They ended her life when she was only 5 seasons old." The 2 males behind her lowered their heads in shared grief. "We were young then." Silver continued. "We did not understand. We thought it was mercy, what our culture teaches. But as we grew older, we saw more of the galaxy. We saw other species who care for their weak, who find ways to adapt, who do not kill those who are different. We realized our culture is wrong." She stepped closer to Roy. "If you can save Ash, if you can prove that not flying does not mean not living, then maybe others will begin to question too. Maybe change will come." Roy studied the 3 young Draconids. He saw genuine hope in their eyes, the same hope he saw in Ash. "What kind of help are you offering?" he asked. Silver gestured, and one of the males opened a large cargo container. Inside were components Roy recognized immediately. Military-grade thruster systems, adaptive neural mesh, power cores that cost more than his entire workshop. "We have connections," Silver said. "Access to technology that civilians cannot obtain. We can give you what you need to complete your work." Roy looked at the equipment and felt his pulse quicken. With these parts, he could finish the surgery. He could give Ash a real chance. "What do you want in return?" Roy asked, because nothing in this station came free. "When Ash flies again," Silver said. "We want you to testify before the Galactic Coalition. Tell them what our culture does. Tell them about the ones we kill because they are inconvenient. Help us bring change." Roy thought about his sister, about all the people who could have been saved if someone had tried something different, about the cost of staying silent. "Deal," he said. They began loading the equipment when alarms suddenly blared through the dock. The lights shifted from red to harsh white. They had been discovered. Ancient Wing appeared at the far end of the bay with a dozen followers. "Traitors!" he roared. "You shame our ancestors! Run!" Silver shouted to Roy. "Take what you can and go." What happened next became a blur. The traditionalists charged forward while Silver and her clutchmates fought to hold them back. Roy grabbed the most critical components and ran, his tool bag heavy with stolen military technology. Behind him, he heard the sounds of fighting, of claws on metal, of angry roars echoing through the abandoned dock. But he did not stop. He ran through corridors he barely knew, taking turns at random, until finally he burst back into his workshop and sealed the door behind him. He was bleeding from a dozen small cuts. His hands were shaking, but he had the parts. Ash was awake, watching him with concerned eyes. The dragon made a low sound, almost a question. "It's okay," Roy said, collapsing against the door. "We're okay. And now we have what we need." He looked at the equipment he had brought back and then at the timer counting down on his security system. 47 hours until the council's ruling. 47 hours to do the impossible. Roy stood up, pushed his fear aside, and got to work. 24 hours remained before the station council would rule on Ash's fate. Roy had not left his workshop since returning from the lower docks with the stolen equipment. His hands moved on autopilot now, guided by pure determination and too many stimulant patches. The cybernetic flight organs lay on his workbench, nearly complete. They were beautiful in their own way, all precision engineering and elegant design. Power cores hummed with stored energy. Neural interface ports gleamed under the work lights. Roy had built many complex machines in his career, but nothing compared to this. Ash watched from his position on the floor, his red eyes never leaving Roy's work. The dragon had stopped making sounds hours ago, conserving his energy for what was coming. They both knew this surgery would either save him or kill him. There would be no middle ground. Roy's personal communicator buzzed. A message from Paige Winters, the security officer who had come to his door with the Draconid delegation. "They're planning to breach your workshop at hour 0. The council will rule against you. I'm sorry. I wish I could do more." Roy deleted the message and kept working. He had expected this. The station could not afford to anger the Draconid community. They were too wealthy, too powerful. One crippled dragon was not worth the political cost. But Roy had made a promise to Ash and he intended to keep it. As dawn cycle began on the station, Roy finally finished the flight organs. He ran diagnostics 3 times to be sure. Every circuit responded perfectly. Every power relay functioned within tolerances. The neural interfaces were calibrated to match Ash's specific brain patterns. Now came the hard part. "We need to do the surgery now," Roy told Ash. "I can't wait for the council's ruling. If we wait, we lose any chance we have." Ash made a small sound of agreement. His eyes were calm despite what was about to happen. Roy saw trust there, complete and absolute. This dragon was putting his life in the hands of a human mechanic who had never performed surgery before. The weight of that trust nearly crushed Roy. He prepared the surgical area, using every piece of medical equipment he owned plus what he had taken from the lower docks. Sterilization fields hummed around them. Diagnostic screens lit up with Ash's vital signs. Automated surgical arms waited for commands. Roy had studied surgical procedures for 3 straight days. He had watched hundreds of hours of recordings, read medical texts meant for doctors with decades of training. But all that knowledge felt useless now as he stood before Ash with a laser scalpel in his hand. "This is going to hurt," Roy said quietly. "I have anesthetics, but they might not work right on your biology. Your neural system is too different from anything in my medical database." Ash closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again and looked directly at Roy. The message was clear. "Do what you must," Roy began. The first incision made him want to vomit. Cutting into living tissue was nothing like working on machines. Blood flowed despite the cauterization fields. Ash's body trembled, but the dragon remained absolutely still, his iron will overcoming the pain. "I'm sorry," Roy whispered as he worked. "I'm so sorry." He exposed the burned flight organs and began the delicate process of removing them. They had fused to surrounding tissue over the months since the injury. Roy had to cut through connections that had formed naturally, separating dead tissue from living. Each cut made Ash shudder, but the dragon did not cry out. Hours passed. Roy's back ached. His eyes burned from staring at microscopic detail work. His hands cramped from holding surgical tools in the same position. But he did not stop. Could not stop. He removed the first destroyed organ and set it aside. The empty cavity in Ash's chest looked wrong, like a hole where something vital should be. Roy fought down panic and reached for the first cybernetic replacement. It fit perfectly into the space, exactly as his measurements had predicted. Roy began connecting the neural interfaces, matching synthetic pathways to organic nerves. This was the critical moment. If the connections were wrong, if his calibrations were off by even a fraction, the implant would be rejected immediately and Ash would die. The first connection locked into place. Diagnostic screens showed neural signals flowing from Ash's brain into the cybernetic organ. The organ responded, power cores lighting up with soft blue light. It was working. Roy felt tears running down his face, but he ignored them. He focused on making the remaining connections, each one a tiny miracle of engineering and biology working together. He moved to the second organ. His hands were shaking now from exhaustion, but he forced them steady. The second implant slid into position. More connections, more neural pathways linking organic to synthetic. Both flight organs were now in place, glowing gently inside Ash's chest. Roy stepped back and checked the diagnostic screens. All readings were stable. The organs were drawing power correctly. Neural signals flowed without interruption, but then the alarm started screaming. Ash's body was rejecting the implants. His vital signs crashed. Blood pressure dropped. Heart rate became erratic. The cybernetic organs were working perfectly, but his body recognized them as foreign and was trying to shut down everything to expel them. Roy stared at the screens in horror. He had built the organs correctly. The connections were perfect, but he had forgotten the most basic rule of implant surgery. The body rejects what it does not recognize. No, Roy said desperately. No. Come on, think. He pulled up the diagnostic data and studied it frantically. The rejection was happening because the cybernetic organs were too efficient. They generated more thrust power than the original biological organs had produced. Ash's body was treating them like an infection, something dangerous that needed to be eliminated. Roy had 30 seconds to fix this or Ash would die. His mind raced through possibilities, discarding options as quickly as he thought of them. Then suddenly he understood. The solution was obvious and completely counterintuitive. He accessed the cybernetic organs' control systems and began reducing their power output. Instead of running at 100% efficiency, he dialed them down to 60%. Made them weaker. Made them imperfect. He made them match what Ash's damaged biological organs would have produced. The rejection stopped. Vital signs stabilized. The alarms went silent. Roy collapsed against the surgical table, gasping for air. That had been too close. A few more seconds and he would have lost everything, but they had made it. The cybernetic organs were integrated, accepted by Ash's body as part of him, rather than an invader. Now came the final test. Roy activated the neural interface fully and spoke to Ash. I need you to try thinking about flying. Just think about it. Imagine moving your flight organs the way you used to. Ash's eyes focused. His breathing changed rhythm. And then the cybernetic organs in his chest began to glow brighter. They were responding to his thoughts. The neural connection was complete. Roy laughed, a sound that was half sob. It works. It actually works. He began closing the surgical incisions, sealing Ash's chest with medical bonding gel that would hold until the tissue could heal naturally. As he worked, he explained what had happened, how the body had rejected the implants until Roy made them deliberately less powerful. You're not as strong as you would have been before, Roy admitted. These organs only give you about 60% of your original flight power. But they work. They're stable, and they're yours. Ash made a sound different from any Roy had heard before. The translator struggled to interpret it, finally settling on a single word. Enough. 60% was enough. Being able to fly at all was a miracle. Being weaker than before was a price Ash was willing to pay. Roy finished the surgery and stepped back. Ash lay on the workshop floor, chest rising and falling steadily. The soft blue glow of the cybernetic organs pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, organic and synthetic working together. Outside the workshop, Roy heard voices gathering. He checked his security system and saw a crowd forming. Station security was there with breaching equipment. Ancient Wing stood with his followers, their faces set in grim determination. The council had made its ruling. Roy looked at Ash. "They're coming. We're out of time." Ash opened his eyes. Slowly, carefully, he tried to move. For 6 months, his body had been a prison. Now, with the cybernetic organs providing structural support and the neural connections restored, he began to shift. His wings trembled. His head lifted off the floor. His legs gathered beneath him. Ash stood up for the first time since the pirate attack. He was shaky, weak from months of immobility. But he was standing. And as he stood, the cybernetic organs in his chest blazed brighter, responding to his will. The workshop door exploded inward. Station security rushed in, followed by Ancient Wing and his followers. They stopped dead when they saw Ash standing in the center of the room, white scales gleaming, blue light glowing from his chest. "Abomination," Ancient Wing whispered. "What have you done?" Ash turned to face them. His mouth opened and something impossible happened. The neural interface Roy had built was more sophisticated than either of them had realized. It connected to not just Ash's flight organs, but to other neural pathways as well. When Ash spoke, his voice came through translated into perfect standard galactic, something no Draconid had ever achieved without external translators. "I am Ash," he said, and his voice echoed through the workshop. "I am Draconid. I am alive, and I will fly." Ancient Wing's face twisted in rage and disgust. "You are a mockery. Part machine, part flesh, all shame. Our laws are clear about those who cannot fly." "Then challenge those laws," Ash replied. "If you truly believe I have no right to live, prove it. Flight of judgment. Let the challenge decide." The crowd outside the workshop went silent. Flight of judgment was an ancient ritual rarely invoked. The challenge party had to complete a flight course considered impossible. If they succeeded, they proved their worth. If they failed, judgment was rendered against them. Ancient Wing smiled coldly. "Very well. I choose the course. The central shaft from bottom to top, 20 kilometers through station traffic, energy conduits, and debris fields. No Draconid has successfully completed it in 50 years. If you can fly it, I will accept your right to live." Ash did not hesitate. "When?" "Now." Roy grabbed Ash's foreleg. "Wait, the organs are untested in real flight. We don't know if they'll hold up to that kind of stress. This is suicide." Ash looked down at Roy with those red eyes that had watched him work for so many days. The dragon's translated voice was gentle. "You gave me wings. Now let me use them." Roy wanted to argue, to run more tests to make sure everything was perfect, but he saw the determination in Ash's eyes and knew that this dragon would fly today, ready or not. "Okay," Roy said quietly. "Then let's make sure you make it." He spent the next 10 minutes running final diagnostics and making tiny adjustments to the cybernetic organs while the crowd waited outside. Station security cleared the central shaft for the challenge. The entire station would watch this flight through security cameras. Finally, there was nothing left to prepare. Ash walked to the workshop door, his movement still uncertain but growing stronger with each step. He spread his wings for the first time in months. They trembled from disuse but held steady. Roy walked beside him to the entrance of the central shaft. The massive tube stretched upward into the distance, a vertical highway for station traffic now empty for the challenge. "Fly fast," Roy said. "Come home." Ash's cybernetic organs flared bright. He crouched, gathering his strength, and then he launched himself upward into the shaft, white scales and blue light disappearing into the distance, proving that sometimes the impossible just needs someone willing to try. The entire station held its breath as Ash disappeared into the central shaft. Roy stood at the launch point, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Every screen around him showed security camera feeds of the shaft from different angles. Thousands of people across Helix 7 stopped what they were doing to watch. Ancient Wing stood nearby with his followers, confident that this challenge would end with Ash's death. Torin had arrived too, along with Silver and her clutchmates. Their faces showed hope mixed with terror. "There," someone shouted, pointing at a screen. Ash appeared on camera, climbing fast through the lower section of the shaft. His white scales caught the station lights and made him look like a shooting star. The cybernetic organs in his chest blazed with blue light, leaving a glowing trail behind him. But Roy saw what others might miss. Ash's flight pattern was uncertain, wavering slightly left and right. The dragon was learning to fly all over again with the new organs. The cybernetic systems responded to his thoughts, but there was a tiny delay between intention and action. Ash had to think differently, adjust his instincts, relearn what should have been natural. "Come on," Roy whispered. "You can do this." The first major obstacle appeared. A cargo transport was crossing through the shaft on one of the designated traffic lanes. Ash had to bank hard to avoid it, wings tucking tight to his body. He shot through a gap that looked impossibly narrow, emerging on the other side with barely a meter to spare. The crowd watching gasped. Ancient Wing's expression darkened. Roy pulled up the diagnostic data streaming from Ash's cybernetic organs. Power output was steady. Neural connections were holding strong, but the temperature was rising faster than Roy had predicted. The organs were working harder than they should be, compensating for Ash's weakened muscles and damaged wings. "He's pushing too hard," Roy said to himself. "He needs to pace himself." But Ash could not hear him. The dragon climbed higher into the shaft, accelerating despite the risks. Roy understood why. Ash needed to prove himself not just to Ancient Wing, but to every draconid who believed that being unable to fly meant being worthless. This flight was about more than survival. It was about dignity. The shaft narrowed as Ash entered the mid-station section. Here, power conduits ran along the walls, crackling with visible energy. Maintenance drones floated through the space, programmed to avoid traffic but not expecting anything as fast as a desperate dragon flying for his life. Ash weaved between the obstacles with growing confidence. His flight pattern was smoothing out, his movements becoming more precise. The organic and mechanical were starting to work together, creating something that was neither purely biological nor purely machine, but a hybrid of both. Roy felt pride swell in his chest. This was working. Against all odds, it was actually working. Then disaster struck. One of the cybernetic organs began overheating. Roy saw it on his diagnostic screen before Ash would feel it. The temperature gauge climbed into the red zone. The organ had been designed for normal flight conditions, not this kind of sustained high-speed climbing through a difficult course. No, Roy muttered, his fingers flying over his tablet trying to find a solution. But there was nothing he could do from here. The organs were sealed inside Ash's body, and they were 15 kilometers away. Ash had 2 minutes before the organ would fail. Maybe less. Roy switched his communicator to the emergency frequency that connected to Ash's neural interface. "Ash, listen to me. Your right flight organ is overheating. You need to reduce speed and use your wings more. Glide when you can. Let the organ cool down." He did not know if the message would get through. The neural interface was designed for motor control, not communication. But he had to try. On the screen, Ash's flight pattern changed. He spread his wings wider, using them to catch air currents instead of relying purely on thrust from the cybernetic organs. His speed decreased, but his climb continued. The temperature gauge stopped rising, started dropping. Slowly, too slowly, but dropping. Roy let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Ash had heard him somehow, or had felt the problem himself and adapted. Either way, the dragon was adjusting his technique mid-flight, learning on the fly in the most literal sense. The upper section of the shaft brought new challenges. Here, the station's primary power grid created massive electromagnetic fields. Normal traffic avoided this area entirely, using auxiliary shafts instead. But the challenge required flying straight through. Ash entered the field and immediately his flight became erratic. The electromagnetic interference was disrupting the cybernetic organ's control systems. Diagnostic data on Roy's screen turned into gibberish, random numbers and error codes. "He's flying blind," Silver said, watching over Roy's shoulder. "The interference is blocking everything." Ash tumbled through the air, wings flailing as the cybernetic organs fired randomly. He clipped a power conduit and sparks exploded around him. His white scales were scorched black in places. But somehow he kept climbing, using pure instinct and determination when technology failed him. Roy could only watch helplessly as Ash fought his way through the electromagnetic storm. Every tumble looked like it might be fatal. Every impact made Roy flinch. But Ash refused to fall. His wings beat frantically, his damaged body pushed far beyond what should have been possible. Then suddenly he was through. The electromagnetic field ended and Ash burst into clear air, trailing smoke but still flying. The diagnostic data reconnected, showing systems that were battered but functional. 5 kilometers remained. The final section of the shaft. This part was considered the easiest in terms of obstacles, just a straight climb to the top. But it was also the longest uninterrupted stretch, which meant it was a test of endurance. Could Ash keep flying long enough to reach the end? Roy watched the temperature gauges creep upward again. The cybernetic organs had been damaged by the electromagnetic interference. They were running less efficiently now, generating more heat for the same amount of thrust. Ash would have to push them to their absolute limits to complete the flight. Ancient Wing was watching the same data. He will fail, the priest said with certainty. The machine cannot endure what the spirit demands. Roy wanted to punch him but kept his eyes on the screens instead. Ash was climbing steadily now, his flight path straight and true. But Roy could see the strain. The dragon's wings were moving slower. His speed was dropping. He was exhausted, running on willpower alone. 4 kilometers to go. One of the cybernetic organs began showing critical warnings. Internal components were breaking down from heat stress and electromagnetic damage. It was losing power output, forcing the other organ to compensate. 3 kilometers. Ash's climb slowed further. He was barely making upward progress now, fighting against gravity with failing equipment and a body that had not moved in 6 months. 2 kilometers. The damaged organ was at 20% function, then 15, then 10. Ash was essentially flying on one working organ and damaged wings. Roy grabbed his communicator. Ash, I know you can hear me. I know you're tired. I know it hurts. But you're almost there. Just a little further. Don't give up now. 1 kilometer. Ash was moving so slowly that he seemed to be hovering rather than climbing. Each meter gained looked like it cost him everything he had. The cybernetic organs were screaming warnings that Roy could not fix. The dragon's vital signs were dropping into dangerous territory. 500 meters. Ancient Wing turned away from the screens. This is pointless. He has failed. He hasn't failed until he stops, Roy said fiercely. And he won't stop. 300 meters. Ash's wings were barely moving. The one functional cybernetic organ was at maximum output, glowing so bright it looked like a small sun in his chest. The dragon was pushing beyond the organ's design limits, burning it out with every second that passed. 100 meters. Roy could see the exit now on the screens, the opening at the top of the shaft where the challenge would end. Ash was so close, so impossibly close. 50 meters. The functional organ's power output dropped to critical levels. Ash began to fall, his wings too weak to support him without the thrust. No, Roy shouted. Ash, you can do this. You have to do this. 25 meters. Ash was falling faster now. The exit was right there, tantalizingly close. But gravity was winning. 10 meters. Roy closed his eyes. He could not watch Ash fall after coming so far. But then the crowd erupted in cheers and Roy's eyes snapped open. On the screen, Ash had done something remarkable. He had stopped trying to fly up. Instead, he had angled his body forward and used his falling momentum to convert into a glide. His wings spread wide, catching air, using every bit of aerodynamic lift he could generate. He shot forward horizontally, losing altitude but gaining speed, and he cleared the exit, exploding out of the top of the central shaft and into the open space of the station's upper docking area. He had done it. Ash circled once in the open air, a victory lap that probably took the last of his strength. Then he descended slowly, gracefully, and landed on the platform where Ancient Wing and the others waited. His landing was rough, his legs nearly collapsing beneath him. The cybernetic organs were both failing now, their glow fading. Ash's wings trembled with exhaustion. Burns marked his white scales. He looked like he had been through a war, but he was standing. He had completed the challenge. Roy ran to him, not caring about protocols or Ancient Wing or anything else. He grabbed Ash's head in both hands and pressed his forehead against the dragon's snout. You magnificent idiot, Roy said, tears streaming down his face. You actually did it. Ash's eyes were half closed with exhaustion. His translated voice came through weak but clear. I flew, that is enough. Ancient Wing approached slowly. His face showed shock, confusion, and something that might have been respect. He looked at Ash for a long moment, then bowed his head slightly. The challenge is complete. The judgment is satisfied. You have proven your right to live, though you are no longer what you were. No, Ash agreed. I am not what I was. I am better. The Draconid community stood divided. Some looked at Ash with disgust, seeing only the machines in his chest. But others, especially the younger ones, looked at him with wonder. Silver was crying openly, her clutchmates beside her. Change would not come easily. Ancient Wing and his followers would continue to resist. But a seed had been planted. A dragon who could not fly had flown anyway, and in doing so, he had shown that maybe their culture's oldest beliefs needed to be questioned. Roy began running emergency diagnostics on Ash's failing cybernetic organs. They would need immediate repairs, possibly full replacement. The dragon had burned them out, pushing beyond their limits. But as Roy worked, Ash spoke quietly to him through the neural link. "Thank you, not just for my wings, for seeing me when others saw only waste." Roy paused in his work and met those red eyes. "Everyone deserves a chance. I just gave you the tools. You did the rest." As medics arrived to help and as the crowd slowly dispersed, Roy felt his communicator buzz with an emergency alert. He almost ignored it, focused on Ash's care. But something made him check. What he saw made his blood run cold. A colony ship carrying 3,000 draconids had suffered catastrophic system failure in deep space. They were drifting toward a stellar graveyard, a region filled with debris from ancient battles. The ship could not maneuver. Rescue vessels were too far away. They had less than 6 hours before the debris field tore them apart. Roy looked at Ash, at the dragon who had just pushed himself to the brink of death to prove he could fly. The cybernetic organs were damaged beyond immediate repair. Ash needed rest, recovery, time to heal. But 3,000 lives needed someone who could fly through impossible spaces. Before Roy could say anything, Ash met his eyes, and Roy saw the decision already made. The dragon turned to face Ancient Wing. "Send me the coordinates," Ash said. "I will go." The emergency operations center on Helix 7 was chaos. Station commanders shouted orders while display screens showed the drifting colony ship Horizon's Dream, tumbling slowly toward the debris field. 3,000 draconids were trapped inside, unable to control their vessel after a reactor malfunction destroyed their navigation systems. Roy stood at a terminal pulling up specifications for the colony ship. Beside him, Ash swayed with exhaustion but refused to sit down. The dragon's cybernetic organs were barely functioning, their glow dim and flickering. Any sane person would see that another flight was impossible. "You cannot go," Ancient Wing said, appearing at Roy's shoulder. "Look at yourself. Your machine parts are destroyed. You will die out there." "Then 3,000 of our people will die with me," Ash replied calmly. "The choice is simple." Silver pushed through the crowd with her clutchmates. "Let us fly with you. We can help." "You should not go alone," Ash shook his head. "The debris field is too dense. Multiple dragons would collide with each other trying to navigate it. This mission requires precision, not numbers." "I go alone," Roy studied the tactical display. The colony ship's stabilizer arrays had locked in wrong positions. Someone would need to fly outside the ship, physically push each array back into alignment and lock them manually. It was delicate work requiring both strength and perfect positioning. In normal space, any draconid could do it. But the debris field made normal space irrelevant. Chunks of destroyed warships, asteroids, and radiation clouds filled the area like a minefield. Organic dragons would be torn apart by impacts or cooked by radiation. Only someone with cybernetic organs that could provide impossible precision had any chance. "The arrays need to be realigned in sequence," Roy explained, highlighting them on the display. "If you do them in the wrong order, the ship will start spinning and tear itself apart. You will have about 30 seconds per array, and there are 6 of them. 3 minutes total," Ash calculated, while dodging debris and radiation. "Yes," Roy said quietly. "And your cybernetic organs are already damaged. I need at least 4 hours to repair them properly." "We don't have 4 hours. The ship enters the densest part of the debris field in 90 minutes. Ash met Roy's eyes. "Then give me what repairs you can do quickly. Make the organs last long enough to complete the mission." Nothing more, Roy wanted to argue. Wanted to say this was suicide. Wanted to forbid Ash from throwing away the life they had worked so hard to save. But he saw the determination in those red eyes and knew arguing was pointless. "Okay," Roy said. "Come with me." They returned to Roy's workshop. 45 minutes remained before Ash would need to launch. Roy opened Ash's chest cavity with careful incisions, exposing the damaged cybernetic organs. They looked terrible, scorched and cracked from the challenge flight. "I cannot fix them," Roy admitted. "But I can overclock them. Push them beyond their design limits to give you the thrust and precision you need. They will burn out completely within an hour, maybe less. If you are not done by then, they will fail and you will be stranded." "How long until I die if they fail?" Ash asked. Roy checked calculations. "In the radiation levels of that debris field, 20 minutes without the organ's shielding functions." Then I have 20 minutes as backup time, Ash said. That is acceptable. It's not acceptable to me, Roy said fiercely. I did not save you just to watch you die. Ash's translated voice was gentle. You saved me so I could live. Living means choosing what matters. 3,000 lives matter more than one. Roy closed his eyes and tried to steady his shaking hands. He thought about his sister, about all the years he had carried guilt for not saving her. Now he was going to lose someone else he cared about, and this time he was helping make it happen. But Ash was right. This was what living meant. Having the freedom to choose even if the choice was sacrifice. Roy began the modifications. He removed safety limiters, rerouted power systems, and pushed the cybernetic organs to configurations they were never meant to handle. The glow intensified as more power flowed through damaged circuits. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. These will give you about 150% of normal output, Roy explained as he worked. You will be faster and more precise than any organic dragon. But every second you use them, they are destroying themselves from the inside. Do you understand? I understand, Ash replied. Finish the work. 20 minutes later, Roy sealed the incisions and stepped back. Ash stood slowly, testing the modified organs. They blazed so bright that everyone in the workshop had to shield their eyes. The dragon moved with sudden grace, his body responding instantly to his thoughts with no delay. It feels perfect, Ash said with wonder. It will feel perfect right up until it kills you, Roy said bitterly. The power output is unstable. If you push too hard, the organs will explode inside your chest. Then I will not push too hard, Ash said simply. Station Command contacted them. The colony ship has entered the debris field's outer edge. Launch window is now. Ash walked to the workshop door. Roy followed, along with Silver, Torin, and dozens of others who had gathered to see the dragon off. They made their way to the station's emergency launch bay where a small rescue pod waited. The pod will get you close, Roy explained. Then you fly the last distance manually. I have coordinates for each stabilizer array loaded into your neural interface. Follow them exactly. Ash nodded. He looked at the gathered crowd and seemed surprised to see so many faces, young draconids mostly, watching him with hope and fear. Ancient Wing stood at the back, his expression unreadable. I am not a hero, Ash told them. I am just someone who was given a second chance. If I can use that chance to help others, then my life has meaning beyond myself. Silver stepped forward and touched her head to Ash's in the traditional draconid gesture of deep respect. Fly with honor. Return with glory. Or don't return at all, Ancient Wing added quietly. Either way, you have shown our people something we had forgotten. That survival sometimes requires change. Ash entered the pod. Roy followed him inside for a final check of the systems. In the privacy of the pod, away from the crowd, Roy let his professional mask drop. I can't lose you, he said. Not after everything we have been through. Ash looked at him with those ancient red eyes. You will not lose me. Some part of me will always remain in your workshop, in your memories. That is the gift you gave me. Not just wings, but the chance to matter. You already mattered, Roy said, his voice breaking. To you, yes. Now I will matter to 3,000 others. Ash paused. That is what humans do best, is it not? You see value in those others overlook. You refuse to accept that anyone is beyond saving. That quality changed my life. Now I will use it to change others. Roy placed his hand over one of the glowing cybernetic organs. Fly fast. Come home. I will try, Ash promised. Roy left the pod and sealed it. The launch sequence began. He watched from the observation deck as the pod accelerated away from the station, carrying a white dragon with blazing blue wings toward an impossible mission. Beside him, Silver was crying. Torin stood with his head bowed. Even Ancient Wing watched silently. Roy pulled up the telemetry feed on his tablet. He could track Ash's vital signs, the cybernetic organ's performance, and the mission progress. It was the only way he could be with the dragon now, through streams of data and readouts. The pod released Ash at the debris field's edge. On the display, Roy watched as Ash launched from the pod and flew into the deadly maze of spinning metal and radiation. The colony ship appeared on sensors, tumbling slowly. Ash approached carefully, dodging debris that moved at lethal speeds. The cybernetic organs performed flawlessly, providing thrust in directions that organic flight could never achieve. Ash reached the first stabilizer array. Roy watched through the ship's external cameras as the white dragon positioned himself perfectly and pushed the massive array back into alignment. The mechanism locked with a green light. 1 down, 5 to go. Ash moved to the second array, weaving through a cloud of small debris that would have shredded organic wings. The cybernetic organs fired in rapid bursts, each thrust calculated and precise. He aligned the second array and locked it. 2 down. Roy checked the organ status. Temperature rising, but still within tolerances. Power output steady. Everything was working exactly as designed. The third array was more difficult. It was on the ship's far side, requiring Ash to fly completely around while avoiding a spinning section of ancient warship debris. Ash threaded the gap with meters to spare and reached the array. But when he pushed it, the mechanism jammed. Ash pushed harder. The array groaned but would not move. On Roy's display, the power output spiked as Ash forced more thrust through the damaged organs. "Don't push too hard," Roy whispered. Though Ash could not hear him, the array suddenly gave way, slamming into correct position. Ash locked it and moved on, 3 down. But Roy saw the temperature warning. The organs were heating up faster now. That last array had stressed them more than anticipated. The fourth array went smoothly. Ash was finding his rhythm, working faster. 4 down. The fifth array was positioned near the ship's engines, which were still firing randomly due to the damage. Ash had to time his approach between engine bursts that would have incinerated him. He waited, watching the pattern, then darted in during a gap that lasted barely 5 seconds. He grabbed the array and pulled it into position just as the engines fired again. The thrust wave caught him and hurled him away from the ship, tumbling through space. Roy's heart stopped as he watched Ash spin out of control toward a cluster of debris. But the dragon used the cybernetic organs to stabilize, firing in sequence to stop the tumble and regain control. 5 down, 1 to go. The temperature alarms were screaming now. Both organs were running dangerously hot. Roy did the math and felt sick. Ash had maybe 10 minutes before catastrophic failure. The last array would take at least 5 minutes to reach and align. It was going to be close, too close. Ash flew toward the final array, positioned on the ship's underside. This one required flying through a narrow gap, filled with electromagnetic interference from the ship's damaged power grid. The same interference that had disrupted Ash during the challenge flight. Roy watched helplessly as Ash entered the interference field, and the telemetry went crazy. On the external cameras, he saw Ash's flight become erratic, as the cybernetic organs misfired. But the dragon had learned from the challenge. Instead of fighting the interference, he used his wings more, gliding through the worst of it, and only firing the organs in brief bursts when he had clear signal. He reached the final array with 3 minutes remaining before organ failure. The array was completely jammed, locked in the worst possible position. Ash pushed against it with all his strength, organic and mechanical combined. Roy watched the power output climb into critical levels. The organs were burning out, melting from the inside. But Ash did not stop, could not stop. The array moved 1 centimeter, then another. 2 minutes to failure. Ash roared, a sound that came through the ship's sensors as pure determination made audible. He pushed with everything he had, burning the last of the organ's operational life in a final surge of power. The array slammed into position. Ash locked it. All 6 arrays were aligned. On Roy's screen, the colony ship's engines synchronized. The vessel began to stabilize, pulling itself out of its tumble. Navigation came back online. They were going to make it. But Ash's cybernetic organs chose that moment to die. The glow in his chest flickered and went dark. The dragon began to drift, his body suddenly limp. Without the organs, he had no way to maneuver in space, no protection from the radiation, no way home. No. Roy screamed at the screen. He was going to watch Ash die after all. Ash drifted through the debris field like a ghost, his white scales already beginning to show radiation burns. The cybernetic organs in his chest were completely dark, their circuits melted beyond function. Without them, he was paralyzed again, exactly as he had been in that cargo bay 6 months ago. But this time, he was dying in the cold vacuum of space. Roy stared at his tablet in horror. Ash's vital signs were dropping rapidly. The radiation was cooking him from the inside. He had maybe 15 minutes before the damage became irreversible. "We need to get him out of there," Silver said desperately. "Send rescue ships." "They will never reach him in time," Ancient Wing said quietly. "The debris field is too dense. By the time they navigate through it, he will be gone." Roy's mind raced through possibilities. There had to be something, some way to save Ash. He had not come this far just to lose everything now. Then he remembered. When Silver and her clutchmates had tried to help during the challenge flight, Ash had refused them. But they had followed anyway, staying at a safe distance. They cared about Ash. They would risk themselves for him. Silver, Roy said, grabbing her shoulders. You followed Ash during the challenge. Can you reach him now? Can you fly through that debris field? Silver's eyes widened. I can try, but I cannot carry him alone. He is too heavy, and the debris will kill us both if we move slowly. Then take your clutchmates, Roy said. All of you together. Form a net with your bodies. Catch him and carry him out. That is suicide, Ancient Wing said. They will all die, or they will all live, Roy countered. Which do you prefer? Watching from safety while someone dies or trying something dangerous because it is right? Silver met Roy's eyes and he saw his own determination reflected there. We will go. Give us the coordinates. Within minutes, Silver and 11 other young draconids had launched from the station. Roy watched them fly toward the debris field, their scales bright against the darkness of space. They were terrified, he could tell from their flight patterns. But they flew anyway. Ancient Wing watched too, his face showing something Roy had not seen before, doubt. The old priest's certainty was cracking as he watched the younger generation choose compassion over tradition. The 12 dragons entered the debris field in formation. They flew carefully, protecting each other, calling out warnings about incoming debris. This was not like Ash's solo flight. This was cooperation, the kind of teamwork that Draconid culture had forgotten when they started killing their weak instead of helping them. Ash's position is 3 kilometers inside the field, Roy said, tracking them on sensors. He is drifting toward a cluster of large debris. If he hits it, the impact will kill him even if the radiation does not. Silver's voice came through communications. We see him. Moving to intercept. On the external cameras, Roy watched as the 12 dragons reached Ash's drifting form. They positioned themselves around him, wings spread wide, creating a living net. When Ash tumbled into them, they caught him gently, cradling his body between them. We have him, Silver reported. He is not moving. I cannot tell if he is alive. Get him out of there, Roy said. Fast as you can without dropping him. The dragons turned as one and began flying back toward the station. But carrying Ash's dead weight made them slow. Debris that they had dodged easily on the way in became deadly obstacles. One of the males took a hit to his wing and cried out in pain but did not let go of Ash. 500 meters to clear space, Roy called out, watching their progress. You can do this. A large piece of debris tumbled directly into their path. The dragons could not maneuver around it while carrying Ash. They would have to go through it between 2 sections that were spinning toward each other. The gap is closing, one of the dragons shouted. We will not make it. Yes, you will, Silver said firmly. On my mark, fold wings and thrust. 3, 2, 1, mark. The 12 dragons tucked their wings tight and fired their organic flight organs in perfect synchronization. They shot through the closing gap like a bullet, emerging on the other side with less than a second to spare. They cleared the debris field. Station emergency teams were already scrambling to meet them. Bring him to my workshop, Roy shouted into communications. I have equipment ready. The dragons flew directly to Roy's workshop bay and landed hard, all of them exhausted. They carefully lowered Ash to the floor and stepped back. Roy was there instantly, his hands moving over the dragon's body with practiced efficiency. Ash was barely alive. His breathing was shallow. His scales were burned black in places. The cybernetic organs in his chest were worse than dead. They had actually begun to poison his system as they broke down. I need to remove the organs, Roy said to his medical assistant. Right now. We cannot wait. He will die without them, the assistant argued. His body relies on them for structural support. He will die with them too, Roy said. They are leaking toxic materials. I have to take that chance. He began emergency surgery right there on the workshop floor. His hands were steady despite his fear. He had done this before, he could do it again. He cut through the damaged tissue and exposed the dead cybernetic organs. They looked like they had been through a furnace. Melted circuits, cracked casings, power cores that had burned out so completely they crumbled at his touch. Roy carefully extracted them, trying not to cause more damage to Ash's body. As he removed the second organ, Ash's body began to collapse inward without the structural support. Roy grabbed a mechanical brace and shoved it into the cavity, holding the dragon's chest open by force. I need new organs, Roy said desperately, but I do not have time to build them. It took me days last time. Then use mine, Silver said. Roy looked at her in shock. What? Draconid flight organs can be transplanted between individuals, Silver explained. It is dangerous and I will never fly as strongly afterward. But I will live. Take one of my organs and give it to Ash. I cannot ask you to do that, Roy said. You are not asking. I am offering. Silver stepped forward. He saved 3,000 lives. I can sacrifice one organ to save his. Ancient Wing moved forward slowly. As can I. Everyone stared at the old priest. I have lived long, Ancient Wing said quietly. My flight is already weak with age, but my organs still function. Between Silver's youth and my experience, together we can give Ash what he needs. Roy looked between them, understanding what they were offering. A young dragon and an old one, representing the future and the past of Draconid culture, both willing to sacrifice for someone who was neither fully organic nor fully machine. This will be the fastest surgery I have ever done, Roy warned. I cannot guarantee success. Do it anyway, Silver said. Roy worked faster than he thought possible. He removed one flight organ from Silver and one from Ancient Wing, careful to leave them enough biological function to survive. Then he transplanted the organs into Ash, connecting neural pathways and blood vessels with speed born of desperation. The organs settled into place, and Roy held his breath as he activated them. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, gradually, they began to glow. Not the bright blue of cybernetics, but the soft amber color of organic Draconid flight organs. Ash's breathing deepened. His vital signs stabilized. He was going to live. Roy collapsed beside the dragon, too exhausted to move. Around him, the workshop was silent except for medical monitors beeping steadily. Ash's eyes opened. He looked at Roy, then at Silver and Ancient Wing, who both looked pale and weak from their sacrifice. Why? Ash asked through the temporary translator Roy had placed. His permanent neural interface was gone with the cybernetic organs. Because you showed us something we had forgotten, Ancient Wing said, that our strength comes not from flying alone but from lifting each other up. You were willing to die for others. How could we do less for you? 3 months later, Roy stood in his workshop watching Ash practice flying in the station's zero-gravity cargo bays. The dragon moved differently now with the organic organs, less precise than the cybernetics but more graceful, more natural. The surgery had left Ash with an unusual combination, one organ from a young dragon and one from an old one, creating a flight pattern that was uniquely his own. He would never fly as fast as he had with cybernetics, but he could fly and that was enough. Silver had recovered fully, though her flying was noticeably weaker. She did not seem to mind. She had started a movement among young Draconids teaching them that helping others was not weakness, but the highest form of strength. Ancient Wing had retired from his position as priest. He now spent his time advocating for medical research into helping injured Draconids instead of killing them. The change had not come easily, but it had come. As for Roy, his workshop had become famous across the galaxy. Requests came daily from different species seeking help with injuries their own medicine could not solve. He could not help them all, but he tried. Each success, each life saved, felt like another step away from the guilt he had carried for so long. Ash landed beside Roy, slightly out of breath, but smiling. The dragon had taken a position as a rescue specialist, using his experience to train others in emergency procedures. What are you thinking about? Ash asked. About how far we have come, Roy said. 6 months ago you were lying in a cargo bay waiting to die. Now look at you. 6 months ago you were a mechanic fixing broken machines, Ash countered. Now you are saving lives across the galaxy. We both changed, Roy smiled. I guess we did. A communication alert chimed on Roy's tablet. He checked it and saw a request from a distant colony. A mining accident had left several workers paralyzed. Local doctors said they could not be helped. The families were begging for someone to try. Roy showed the message to Ash. What do you think? Should we go? Ash spread his wings, the mismatched organs in his chest glowing softly amber. One young, one old, working together to create something new. Someone out there needs us, Ash said. Let us find them. They walked together toward the docking bay where Roy's ship waited. A human and a dragon, a mechanic and a miracle, heading back into the galaxy to prove once again that impossible just meant nobody had tried the right way yet. Behind them, Silver and her followers launched from the station on their own mission of mercy. Ancient Wing watched from the observation deck, his reduced flying days behind him but his purpose renewed. The galaxy was vast and full of suffering, but it was also full of people willing to help, willing to sacrifice, willing to believe that everyone deserved a chance. Roy had learned that from his sister's death. Ash had proven it with his life, and together, they would spend the rest of their days making sure no one else had to choose between tradition and hope. As their ship accelerated into the dark, Roy looked at Ash and felt something he had not felt in years. Peace. Not because the work was done, but because it had meaning. "Thank you," Roy said quietly. "For what?" Ash asked. "For letting me save you. For giving me a reason to keep trying when I wanted to give up." Ash placed a claw gently on Roy's shoulder. "You are wrong, my friend. You saved me first, but I think we both saved each other." The ship jumped to faster than light travel, carrying them toward the next impossible challenge, the next life that others had given up on, the next chance to prove that sometimes all someone needs is one person who refuses to accept that they cannot be helped. Somewhere behind them on Helix 7, a young draconid with a damaged wing looked up at the stars and felt hope for the first time. If Ash could fly again, maybe anyone could, and that hope, spreading slowly but surely through a culture that had forgotten it, was the greatest miracle of all. The end of this story. But the beginning of change.